Well, God bless.
Hello, how are you all?
Good, how are you
Wonderful.
doing?
How are you?
Good. No complaints here. Enjoyed a wonderful message and certainly glad to see all of your faces again. Because when I say all, I mean
One.
two.
Well, this is exciting today because today I get to interview your mother and you.
You do?
Look at that face.
Yes. This is isn't that a surprise?
Hang on, then. It sure is. Look at her face. That's a surprise.
I know. Surprise.
Mama
Today,
Bob.
it's been on my mind, and I think we shared earlier, and I did not tell your mother, and I did that on purpose because I wanted to really deal with something that I think it's been quiet for long. You don't hear too much about it, but I can really see it, and I can see the effects of it. And something that I did with my regional work when I was doing regional work and workshops, had a series that was called Healing the Wounds of PKs. So today I want to deal with some PKs issues. And I'm bringing your mother in because she's not a PK, but she is a third generation of COGIC. She's, is that correct, 3 generations? And your uncle was a district superintendent. And so you were around PKs. And your second cousin was the bishop. So let us begin, and I'm going to just jump right into it. And I'm really going to start with First Lady Clay first, and then I'm gonna come to you. And the question I want to ask you, First Lady Clay, is how does a mother feel about having preacher's kids? How does a mother feel about having preacher's kids?
Well, I don't know. For me, you'd feel very protective of your children. And I felt like I needed to give my children a safe place. And I always wanted them to feel like they were priority in our lives because we spend so much time with the church and just allowing the membership to be in our lives. Now, for me personally, the hardest part, even though you asked about having the children, but for me personally, the hardest part was what I felt like giving up my privacy, because I am a private person. And I believe that my home is my sanctuary, and that if I invite you into my home, I want you there. But uninvited, it's not a welcome sight for me. So, I felt like we had to give up a lot of our privacy because I realized by you being a pastor that the membership had times when we weren't at church, our off hours, so to speak, where they would call or come. So I wanted my children to feel like they had a safe haven and a sanctuary in their own home, because they're always in a bubble. We're always in a bubble. Everybody looks at everything they do.
I'm going to split this, and I'm going to ask you one more question, then I'll give you a break, then I'm gonna go to Minister Play, then I'm gonna come back to you. How do you deal with the wounds of PKs? How does a mother deal with the wounds of PKs when your children have been wounded? How does a mother deal with the wounds of PKs?
That's kind of a broad question because you have to deal with things as they come up.
Okay.
You have to deal with them as they come up.
Okay.
And I've tried not to throw the Bible at them every time an issue arose. Every time they had every time something came up that was hurtful to them, I tried to make sure that my answer in dealing with them was not, well, the Lord will take care. The Lord said vengeance is his, and just throw the Bible. I really tried to deal with my children in the personal sense. Just like if they had an issue at school, you tell them if somebody hits you, hit them back. Don't start the fight, but you can defend yourself. And that's the way I did in the church, and of course we taught them to respect their elders, when it's an adult issue, to come to me or come to your dad, and don't be disrespectful that way. But if it's youth on youth, if it's children dealing with, deal with them, just to deal with them. So their wounds, again, I tried to make sure that they felt safety in me, safety in you to say, Mom, Dad, this is what happened, and I'm angry about it, or I'm hurt about it, or I didn't like this, because at the end of the day, our children are still our children first.
Was there ever, I understand, was there ever respond to when you observed the hurt and felt the hurt? I understand. Where were you at mentally? Were you angry? Did you understand what they were feeling, or where were you at, being that you were a third generation of COGIC child, or for those that don't know COGIC, that you had 3 generations of families being raised in a church.
Yeah. And being raised in the church and being a PK are really 2 different things. In my household, my mother was saved. We just knew a saved mother, a COGIC mother, growing up until our teens. And our father wasn't. He was a jazz musician. However, he respected Mom. He respected us. We were always allowed to, I think we lived in church. I mean, we were at the shut-ins. We were at Sunday service. We were at Wednesday service. We were at Friday service. In between, vacation Bible school, all that. And Dad never, he never bothered that. And he never brought his lifestyle into our home, because I think he respected that part of Mom. And so he wasn't a smoker or a drinker. Well, he wasn't a smoker at all. I'm sure he probably was a social drinker, but he wasn't a drinker in the home. So we never saw that side of him. So getting back to, I don't want to veer too far, but getting back to, as far as being PKs, the thing that makes it different is that us being pastor and wife, that we live this. And in my home growing up, even though my mom was saved, it wasn't, we lived it all the time. We went to church and we were church kids at church, and at home we got to be kids at home. We couldn't bring the disrespectful stuff in the church, but so it makes a big difference. PKs, they live the church all the time, even when they're not at the church. You know, because like I say, we deal with a lot of things in our home because church membership costs, church membership, you know. Now the church is a little different. It's a little different because we have office hours and, you know, things like that, whereas that didn't used to be the norm. And now that's kind of the norm in the church world. So again, I think that's what makes the difference between growing up in the church and being a PK. Now they'd have to tell you from their perspective.
Okay.
Also by me being the church I was raised in, my uncle, who was married to my mother's sister, my uncle was the pastor. And my mom and her sister were close, and my mom worked like in the secretarial capacity of the church. So we were always around our first cousins, and
Which they were the PKs.
they were the PKs.
Right.
But we were closely related in the fact that we were close, and we spent a lot of time at their house as cousins. And our off hours, we spent a lot of time around each other as cousins. And because of that, and my siblings would have to speak for themselves, but because of that, I think we kind of felt that we had to protect them a little bit.
Is that what you would call it's a family affair?
The family. But I think we felt like we kind of had to protect them because, again, the other kids at church would think, oh, they're just little privileged kids. Those are the pastor's kids, and they get to do whatever. And we knew differently, you know, so we kind of felt like we had to kind of protect them in a way. And I think that's what I carried over into when we started pastoring. I know how my cousins were treated, and I felt like as their mother, I wasn't going to let my children be treated like that.
Okay. And I know I put you on the spot, but we wrote Brown.
Well, I'm used to it.
We wrote Brown, and I'm gonna come back to you. Minister Clay, I want you to fill in the blank. I want you to fill in the blank.
Yes, sir.
You know you're a preacher's kid when fill in the blank. You know you're a preacher's kid when
when you spend as much time at church as you do anything else. How about that? You know, I don't like stereotypes, so I was trying not to say anything that reinforced the stereotype. So I struggled a little bit because I wanted to dodge all the stereotypes.
and we're gonna deal with some stereotypes also. So
that's fair.
okay. I'm going to give you one more just to open this up. I hate being a pastor's kid. Why? Fill in the blank.
Because people think you're born with the antibodies to sin.
Is that it?
Would you like me to expound?
Yes. Because this is something that I have observed. This is one of the things that is not really talked about in the churches, and there's not really a place to where the PKs can get together, to get together and communicate. I know that you may have some settings that you might in passing, but just to sit down and have a dialogue, because there's so many PKs that have gotten wounded in the church and wounded. And a lot of them have left the church and gone other places. And it's something that needs to be discussed. We are discussing everything else. Education, we're discussing civil rights, human rights. We're discussing politics. We're having discussions about wealth, prosperity. But there's the discussion about the life of PKs and how they're feeling it. So,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And
so I hate being a pastor's kid.
Because people believe you're born with the antibodies to sin. And I say that thinking now we're in a pandemic and there's an antibody test to determine if you have been exposed to COVID and have fought it off, essentially, layman's explanation. When you're a PK, at the age of 9 years old, they look at you and say, you're not gonna cuss, you ain't gonna fight, you ain't gonna be interested romantically in anybody, you're not gonna be curious about experimenting with alcohol, drugs, all those sort of things like everyone else. People think you have the antibodies. People think you're cured before you even live life. And therefore, the standard and the expectations that people have of you strip you of the opportunity, or it would strip you of the opportunity to go through life in the rites of passage that other people can do so without intense scrutiny. So that piece of it, I think, and I can speak as an individual, and I certainly leave a lot of room for others to have their experiences. But for me, I think maybe a commonality would be that expectation that you have this antibody towards sin and you do not have the opportunity to experience, grow, evolve, have those rites of passage, make those individual decisions without intense scrutiny. I think all preachers' kids hate that.
Since you're there and you made a couple statements, let me hit a question. What are some of the stereotypes of PKs? Because you talked about not having an antibody. So what are some of the stereotypes of PKs?
So I think the stereotypes, they tend to be that PKs are worse than everyone else as it relates to their behavior, as it relates to their decision making.
What do you mean worse?
Worse,
what do you mean by worse?
You do as much and more than the common person. And I say that I'm 36 years old and still I meet people, and even on my job, there's people who have recently found out and said, "Oh, wow, your parents pastor a church. You're a PK." Yeah. Oh, and I'm just ready. In my mind, I have 40 things that they're going to say, and I'm going through my mind, which one do I think you're going to pull out? But that worse than everyone else is probably prominent. And I think in many times it's the double standard, but, and I will traverse a very controversial space. There's truth to everything. There's an element of truth to everything. That doesn't mean everything is true. And there's a very big gulf of distinction there, but there's truth. The truth may be an experience that someone else has had, even though it's not you. The truth may be there's a conversation where you derived a perspective from, although that hasn't been accelerated to the point of action. But there have been PKs, preachers' kids, who have had to defend themselves, to demonstrate that they're not pushovers, to demonstrate that they're not weak and brittle and frail and unable to stick up for themselves. There have been preachers' kids that have gone to the extremes of demonstrating who they are or who they want to portray as it relates to the individuality. Because as a preacher's kid, part of the plight is to step from underneath the category and underscore your own individuality. None of us in life like to be stereotyped or generalized. All of us want the opportunity to represent our individuality. So for preachers' kid, there might be some extreme things said or done to demonstrate individuality. And from that, there's this narrative that comes and rolls. You know, you're going to run and you're going to jump off a cliff on your BMX bike. Well, I'm going to go do that, and I'm going to let go of the bike and land on my feet to show you, you know, I'll take it to the next level because I'm an individual and I'm no lesser than you are. So I think that has evolved, that perspective that preachers' kids are worse than everyone else. It's evolved. Go ahead, please.
Is that a true stereotype?
I wouldn't call it true because, again, in the spirit of individuality, my truth is a bit different than the next person's truth. There might be someone who has made it their life mission to run the exact opposite way of the church and to take every opportunity to prove that they don't believe all that stuff, that they're not that type of person, that they aren't the way that they were represented because of the family they were born in and because of the connection that they maintain to preachers. So for some, it could be their truth. I've known preachers' kids who have certainly fulfilled that stereotype, and then I've known others whom may be misunderstood because, again, there may be these demonstrations of individuality that are taken out of context and utilized to fulfill a stereotype. If someone told you that all Black men speed in their cars, let's just keep it light because this is a heavy day right now. If someone tells you that and you see one Black man after you hear it go over the speed limit in their car, you're going to take that sample size and say it's true. Right. No matter the sample size. For men and women in relationships, if you believe all men are dogs and you date somebody and he dogs you out, then that's all men. That fulfilled the stereotype. All you needed was the sample size of one to reach a conclusion that a stereotype was true. And I think sometimes that's what can happen. People will take the sample size of a few to represent the masses and try to fulfill a stereotype.
Okay, here's one that I'm going to lighten up, and I want to split this between your mother and yourself, something a little light.
But can I put a semicolon behind the question that you asked?
Sure.
About what was the worst? Well, when I left, I hated when, I think you said, I hated when and asked him to fill that in.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, again, being...
I hate being a pastor's kid.
Yeah.
Why?
And, you know, still as a mother to the pastor's children, it was like, I hate when people feel like our children should be the post children to the church.
Okay.
That's fair. That's fair. That's
would that be the same thing as living in a glass house?
Not really. I mean, living in the glass house means everything is seen. You know, they see everything. There's nothing hidden. You have no blind shades, curtains, or anything. Everybody can see everything. But saying they should be the poster, you know, they should be the best kids in the church. Because you asked him at one point, I know I left for a second, but this is live and I'd have to take it. But, you know, when people say the church kids are the worst kids, the pastor's kids are the worst kids in the church, but it's like, you know, I've spent, even before I became a pastor's wife, I have spent a lot of time mentoring young women because that's where my heart is and that's what I love doing. Because I had strong mentors in my life. And so I think I just kind of reciprocated that naturally just because that was what happened in my life. But not just young men, young women, but, you know, young men too. And, you know, when it's like when my daughter gets pregnant before she's married, everyone sees that and she doesn't get to hide it. And they say, but she's the pastor's daughter. But when their daughters got pregnant in church and they hid it and they came to me and said, my daughter is pregnant, but we don't want to tell her right now, you know, until she shows. But we want you to put your arms around my daughter so she doesn't feel bad and she will continue to come to church. Will you talk to my daughter so others don't make her feel so bad so she doesn't come to church? Well, you want me to do that for your daughter, but where is the same grace that you want me to have? My son gets a young woman pregnant and you want us to put our arms around him and, you know, tell him just take care and everything. But when it's my son, when it's your son, you want us, you know,
To understand.
yeah. But when it's my children, everybody in the church wants to crucify them or say the pastor's kids are the worst. Well, my kids are at the same point that your kids are. They're young people growing up, and they have the same feelings and emotions that your children do. Your children may experience with drugs. Well, what if ours do? It's the same thing. I was young once too, and even though, again, my mother was saved and we were taught against those things, even my father taught us, you know, not to do things like that. But that doesn't mean we didn't do it because we were young people wanting to experience. We want to fit in, so to speak, with everybody else. So young people make mistakes, adults do too, but young people make mistakes growing up. So understand the pastor's kids have that and much more to deal with, you know.
May I
So-
compliment that? In
Say it again.
In the spirit of my father, who likes to take over questions and reroute those to his own, I will reroute that organically if you don't mind. I think a very important distinction on this topic is to understand the separation between salvation and birth,
Indeed. Indeed.
right? The Levites, one of the 12 tribes.
Come on, Pastor Clay.
The Levites were given to take care of the tent of meeting, the tabernacle, Evolve It, Temple Church. You're born as a pastor's kid without covenant to God. You're born as a preacher's kid without your own personal covenant to God. That is your family. If your father is a farmer, then you're raised within the context of agriculture.
Right.
If your mother is a crackhead, you're raised in the environment of a crack house. If your father is a convict, you're raised under the conditions connected to someone who is a convict. That's without personal choice or covenant. Oftentimes what we blend and bleed and confuse is covenant versus that birth role. The birth role is I was born to the tribe of Levi. That makes me no more important than the next person from the next tribe. The tribe of Levi, when you study the tent of meeting and the encampment of the 12 tribes around it, the tribe of Levi was centered around the tent of meeting. They were centered around the tent of meeting. So they were central, they were visible. All the other tribes are looking toward the tent of meeting and the Levites are central. So you're always visible, which means there's an example, whether you want to be a part of it or not, because people see you. But don't misconstrue that to being importance. If your kid sins, that's more important that they live right and don't do X, Y, and Z because you're part of the tribe of Levi. Well, I want you to understand that the Levites weren't more important than all the rest of the tribes. We have different roles. I'll underscore that. Jesus wasn't from the tribe of Levi. His lineage came from the tribe of Judah. So if the preacher's kids and their behavior was more important than the rest, then why would the Son of God come through the lineage of the tribe of Judah and not the tribe of Levi? We all have different roles here. So people will mistake the personal covenant, which is all of our journeys. I'm 36 years old. I'm still on my journey. Whether I was a preacher's kid at the age of 12, birth, and I was before I was even born, that was mom and dad's choice.
Right.
That was your choice. And I'm born in the tribe of Levi. And then when I enter a covenant relationship with God, my journey is going to have the same kind of hiccups and generally speaking, it's going to have the same kind of challenges and hiccups as the next person's journey. So I think oftentimes when people look at the preacher's kids, they blend this concept of Christian covenant and behavior and expectations with birth. I'm born to this tribe, but my covenant is my own journey. Your covenant is your own journey. And people tend to blend that. Then you also have this competition piece between parenting. If you're the pastor, who says you're a better parent than a lay member? If you're the pastor's wife, who says you're more prepared and better executing as a mother than the next person? Well, last I seen, no one can control their kids completely. So those are also, some of those variables and those external factors that tend to blend a bit and muddy the water of this conversation between Christian behavior.
This is good, and I'm as my youngest son would say, I'm on time constraints, so I have to try to move this along.
Yes, sir.
This is a question that I'm going to ask you and then your mother.
Yes, sir.
All right. How do you date a pastor's kid?
Ooh.
You being a PK, how do you date a pastor's kid?
Man. Okay. Let me see my wife. Okay. So I'll tell you, that is a highly individualized question and answer. However, there are some things you need to understand about preachers' kids. You need to understand the point I made a moment ago of what it
But
means.
now wait a minute, so hold on before you, because I want the meat of a mother, because a mother has to put that in on how to go about.
You mean for them to date?
If you are a PK.
Yeah,
so you as a PK, how do you?
Absolutely. So again, you have to very much understand what that role is. In some instances, we could think about the priesthood component of being a PK and what that role is that you're born into. Those duties that you're born into, what that means for your schedule, what that means for your free time, what that means for your weekend, what that means to be connected to the investment of the success of your parents' ministry. Mm-hmm. And having that conversation when you're dating is really important, because the other person, they really will encounter that regardless of what your individual personality is. Your mind is on your parents in the church. Your mind is on the ministry. And in many ways, like a small business, there's so many different things that you are responsible for as a family that it bleeds over again into your free time and what you do with your time and what you do with your resources. Your heart, your money is invested. Your physical labor is invested. When it comes to dating and doing special things around holidays and the traditional vacations, we're wired to think different because holidays mean something different within the context of running a ministry, running a church, preaching. Summertime means something different. Summertime for me wasn't this time to run away and vacation for 2 months, because we know church attendance in the summer typically dwindles, which means the load of the pastor and the first lady is increased while people are off vacationing, and the load that trickles down to the children increases. So my summers didn't look like the next person's summers. And that might seem really indirect and informal, but even trying to date in the summer, trying to get away with your friends, the kind of things that you do, all of that changes. Holidays change, Christmas changes. Pastors, preachers are planning sacred celebrations during the Christmas season when everyone else is invested in gift giving and planning the holiday parties. Easter is different. So there's a big conversation of the culture and the expectations, both direct and indirect, that you have to have when you're dating, because that will put a strain in relationship, because dating is about aligning value systems. And when there are things that shape your value system and the way that you spend your time and your money and where your mind and your head is at when you're on dates and at different points in the year, that is something that you have to communicate across to your partner because it is so intrinsic and it's so ingrained in everything that you do. There are natural conflicts that will come between you and another person, and they might think it's about you and your personality, but it's actually connected to a value system and a weight and a concern and a role that is a part of who you are. And those things can be in conflict, let alone the individual personality mismatching that you have going on. So I think how to date is to actually address this issue. Excuse me, let me correct it. Not issue, address the relationship and the expectations and the issues and then the opportunities that come along with it. I think you have to talk about that up front so you don't end up having these conflicts that aren't really between the two people, but because the value systems and the perspectives aren't necessarily in alignment.
How does a mother or how does the parents, what type of teaching or training, or is there such thing as how to train a PK on how to date? What were your instructions with your 3 kids? When they were at the age of dating, did you instruct them? Was there any instructions that maybe I didn't know? Maybe you did it and I wasn't around. Was there anything that you did concerning their dating practices, or?
I'm sure it was a whole lot. But on the serious note, I think Quentin really spoke to, again, what I would say, and to them a lot, again, finding somebody with the same value system, finding somebody that believes, like they believe, because I knew if they didn't believe and understand the church of God in Christ, that would be a big conflict for them. So, I think probably the biggest thing would be, if it was somebody that didn't understand the church, I tell them, they're not going to get it. They're not going to understand.
Is that the unequally yoked?
Probably. And I'm sure I probably put it under the unequally yoked because, again, my background and my being raised in the church of God in Christ, it was we had strong teaching. So I'm sure I had a lot of if you would have asked my kids, to be honest, not have to duck, they'd probably say I had a lot of strong teaching, of the old ways, maybe, to, not be unequally yoked. However, I also tried to, I always felt like my mom was a really good example of a saved mother, because we didn't have to, back then, you had to wear your dresses, as the girls had to wear dresses. They couldn't put on pants, shorts, that kind of thing in the Church of God in Christ. But however, my mom led us, and it may have been because of Dad as well. I don't know what conversation they had as husband and wife. And we got to listen to the worldly music. Again, my father was not saved, so jazz was he lived jazz, and we listened to music from sun up to sundown, and that was never an issue. But we knew right from wrong. We knew what was the church music and what was the world.
The secular.
Right, but it was called worldly then.
Right,
it wasn't
right.
secular. Secular is the nice thing. So church, worldly, so we understood that. And we weren't blind as far as we knew people smoked, drank, and cussed, even though we were raised in the church. And we knew that we were her children and we weren't saved and she was saved, So I tried to give that balance to our children as well, that you can't be us. However, people are going to expect that. And I think, again, I probably spent a lot of time saying to my children, as much as I didn't want them to feel like that, but people are looking at you and they want you to be, or they expect you to be, different from everybody else. I didn't try to make them be different, but I think I kept that before them, that yes, everybody is watching you. Yes, because you are the pastor's kids. Yes, they expect more out of you, but you guys make mistakes anyway. But regardless of what I said to them, it's how the people made them feel when they went through their transitions in life. But again, it goes back to that question you asked in the beginning. I tried to make sure our children had a safe haven, that they had safety in coming to us. Now, we know children aren't gonna bear all to their parents all the time, but I wanted them to feel like their home, they had a safe place at home to say, listen, I don't want to be saved. And even as they grew up, I know, and I still say, I thank you, the three of them, for lending their talents back to the church. However, if you feel like that's not what you want to do, I will accept that too. Now they may feel a certain way, about it, but that's really how I feel. I thank God that they have given their talents back to the church. However, I don't ever want them to feel like, because I don't want them to be miserable in their life. And then at the end of the life saying, you know what, I did all that to please mom and dad, but I was never fulfilled. I was never happy. I was never pleased because it was for them. And then they walked away with the wrong lesson. It wasn't even for God. It was for our parents, so our parents wouldn't be disappointed with them.
Okay. Here's one. Minister Clay. What happens when the PK is mentioned in a sermon? How does a PK feel when you're mentioned in a sermon?
It depends on the age, and it depends on the context and how you're mentioned. Sometimes it's a balm, it's a special balm that can rub you the right way because you take so many darts and you have a target on your back. And when your parent has the ability, to call you out in a positive way and celebrate you publicly, it means something. It does, because you are ridiculed publicly, you are attacked publicly, you're on guard publicly. So whenever your parents can give you a compliment in a message and all hear that, that's very, very, very special. And that's part of that continuum, that gift and curse, if you want to say it that way. I wouldn't call PKs curse, but you want to think about the benefit and then sometimes the detriment that comes along with it. Others can't do that necessarily. Other parents don't necessarily have that microphone to publicly praise. And then I'd make that argument, if everyone's so concerned with that, well, let's go ahead and put your kid up for criticism and have to pin them to the dartboard the way we are all the time as well. So it's a two-edged sword, if you will. On the other hand, I've seen instances, and I can't recall a serious time where I was ever used in a sermon in a negative way. Sometimes there are situations that we work through as a family, and when it gets to a point where the healing is there and it's funny and we reflect back on it, dad will throw that thing, especially dad, dad will throw that up. If it's floating around in here, it's coming out somewhere, so dad will bring out some of those examples. But dad was always very, very well groomed in his sermon delivery, and he knew how to time it, essentially, and not bring stuff up that's uber sensitive. So I can't personally recall either that, or it's really scarring, and I've buried it back in my subconscious because I haven't gotten over it. So maybe dad did, and I just buried it to get over it. But the other piece of it is, and I want to kind of marry this here. Sometimes when you're mentioned within the sermon, or just because you're a preacher's kid, it puts you on the front lines for theological debate and religious debate. And because your parent celebrates you or praises you, and you're perceived to be, this model person or this leader or this next in line, then people will bring to you religious and theological debates. And I mean, I can remember as a kid, adults having different issues with the church and different issues with the pastor and different issues with Christianity. And they throw out these passive aggressive microaggression comments in the presence of you as a PK. And they're sending shots, back at your parents or at the church or the religious institution or Christianity. Mm-hmm. And you find yourself in a situation where you're pricked and you say, either I'm going to respond to this, or you try to muster up the strength to be strong enough to kind of walk away from it. But you are actually on the front line for theological and religious debate. People will say, well, I don't believe this is wrong, and I don't believe this is wrong. Well, in my house, you might be visiting, your friend, and their parents say, well, in my house, my kids can do that. We can do that. And really, in a very passive aggressive way, it puts you in contention and on the front line of this theological or doctrine oriented debate, because they've said it to you and in front of you. And especially as you get older and you're cognizant of the teachings that your parents are leading, then you find yourself wanting to step in and defend them in spaces that they're not in. And I think that's also why a lot of PKs kind of walk through life with wounds. It's like, wait a minute, I'm 12 years old. I haven't gone to seminary, What do you expect me to do in this moment? And I know you're talking about my parents, or I know you're talking about the church they represent, or the denomination that they're affiliated with, or just Christianity as a whole. So you find yourself in that situation, and sometimes that's amplified when you are brought, when that spotlight is further intensified on you, with your parents speaking about you across the pulpit. And its causality it is kind of cause and effect, but it's more represented through opportunists who will take a moment to say, oh, your son is blank, 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 or your daughter is blank, blank, blank. Oh, they're so good, they're so wonderful. I'm gonna find my way to them after service or at the next social event or on the church van when we're riding to an event. And I'm gonna go ahead and give a piece of my mind to them, because they will try to send that poison back to the pastor and wife indirectly if they can't get to them directly. And I'll say this, and I'll leave it alone. It's funny how public servants, politicians, kings, queens, presidents, famous folks, rich folks, company CEOs, they have security around their children to protect their children. But PKs don't necessarily get that same security around them. And it's not about wealth necessarily, but that notoriety piece of it, and that identifiable nature of who they are, and the controversy, because people don't like being told what's right and wrong anyway. So they got a huge problem with any religious establishment, just off of principle. But there really has to be a certain level of security that's there. And sometimes prayer, not even sometimes, all the time, prayer is that security to guard the minds and the emotions and the well-being of those PKs. Because I can't tell you how many settings I'm in, and I'm thinking, you're the adult here. Who is this for? I'm here to play with, or I'm in this situation, ain't got anything to do with you as an adult, but you're sending these indirect shots. They try to assassinate, they try to hold for ransom the emotions and the well-being of the PK in order to get to and affect and impact the pastor and first lady. And I guarantee if we open up this conversation to multiple PKs, there would be those common experiences where the assassins came out and the abduction attempt was there, and those shots and those darts were sent at the PK to get to the parent. So those things are something you have to be careful with. And again, I connect it back to anytime there's an additional praise lumped on you, you can expect that it's coming from some of the membership and laity.
Well, I have a few more things, and I will make some comments on. When everybody forgets your name, and you are, oh, that's so-and-so's kid. Everybody forgets your name. You're only, what happens when you only identify with your pastor? You don't have a name. Oh, that's Pastor Clay's son. How does a PK feel when they forget your name or lose your name and you're always identified with?
As with all things, there's multiple responses. Sometimes your parents can make you really proud, and that's a badge of honor because no one can say that but me. Sometimes, and I ain't saying this is my parents, and I said I ain't. As a matter of fact, I slurred them. I ain't saying this is my parents, but sometimes your parents don't necessarily make you proud. And I have PK friends whose parents have put them in awkward situations, and that identifiable moment is very difficult. But there's an immature and there's a mature response. The immature response can be whatever that personality conjures up as a retort. The mature response is to understand that for some people, even if they know your name, that affiliation is a compliment. They're saying the best of a person that I respect and admire, I can see connected to who you are. And I'm actually growing and maturing at this stage of my life to not hold people to words as much, because sometimes people don't know how to articulate, and sometimes people don't know how to say what they mean and convey what they mean and what they're feeling. And many times you can be rubbed wrong and it can be abrasive because a person doesn't have the tools to say, hey, I know who you are, and I just want to say, I know who you are, and I recognize that you're special, and I just wanted to make you feel good. And then other times, there are people who won't take time to get to know who you are, and that's a problem as well. Sometimes people are they're so inebriated with the celebrity of the preacher or the pastor that they don't care anything about anything else, right? And in many of those instances, you as the PK can feel that. So there's an immature response and there's a mature response.
Okay. Listen, we're our time is getting real close, and this is, I'm gonna split this up, and then I'm gonna make some observations. I guess I can make a statement here. It might be strange, a pastor talking to his son or children and those that are viewing, and even my wife, the first lady, but because I'm not a PK, I don't know, even though I have 3 children that are PKs, I don't know how y'all feel because I'm not a PK. And so we can't take it for granted. Sometimes that's why I communicate with you, my children, so much, because I want to know where y'all stand, how y'all feeling, and how are you doing. That being said, who really is the pastor's wife? Who really is the pastor's wife that has the pastor's children? Who really is the pastor's wife that has the pastor's children?
I'm gonna let my hair down. Actually, I'm a mama bear. I'm definitely a mama bear, and I'm not, that a lot of times comes with a negative connotation. And I'm not ashamed to say I am a mama's bear. I love my children. I have always loved being a mom to my 3 children. I love my children dearly. I didn't want them to grow up. That's how much I love them. I just wanted to keep them as my babies. So, who really is the pastor's wife
with PK children?
With PK children.
Children.
You're asking me, this is not a point of discussion or debate with anybody else, but you're asking me who I am. I am a mama bear. I love my children. I want the best for my children. I want them to be the best in life, in society, in their careers, educationally, the whole gamut. You know, I think what a mother that loves her children would want. I want them to be successful. I want them to be happy. I want them to look back and say, we've had a good experience because of our parents, you know, in our home. I want them to be able to look back on their childhood fondly, because sometimes that's a thing that carries you through different situations as adults when you're going through downtimes. So my prayer is that I have, as a mother, set that for them. The pastor's wife, me, it's a lonely place. You can't share things with other people in the church. You may be able to share with another pastor's wife, but you don't have any best friends in the church, because again, it's a place of, you want to be safe and you want your children to be protected. And I think Clinton said that so well, you know, because I have seen that, again, being the pastor's niece, I have seen adults get at my cousins because they had issues with my aunt and uncle. I've seen that. So I know, and then I've seen people try to get close to my cousins because of the pastor and his wife, because they wanted to wiggle their way in. I've also experienced it, you know, personally. I've seen people try to wiggle in my family and not mean well, you know. So I get both sides of it. It's not so much a horrible experience all the way, but it's not always a happy experience. And again, these discussions are, you know, keeping it real, you know. So we've had happy times, we've not had happy times. I have had times where I've said, I hate being the pastor's wife. I just want to be Mary Jo Dawson Clay. I don't want to be Pastor Clay's wife, Superintendent Clay's wife. I don't want to be the pastor's wife. I just want to be me and have fun with my children, have my time with my husband. I don't want to have to share that space. So it's a complicated role to be in.
That's a bear.
That's that mama bear. I'm a true mama bear. I'm a true mama bear. And I don't, like I said, I'm not ashamed of it. And I think I wear it. I may be quiet, but I know my nonverbals are loud enough that I wear it in a proud, right up here, that you know that.
Well, but this is something that I want to pass on to Minister Clay today. This is something that's been dear to me. I am a PK's helper, and I believe that we really need to put our arms around, and we need to reach out. And those PKs that have left the church, those PKs that have been wounded, and I think we need to reach out and encourage them. We know that God's able to do all things. And so today I wanted to deal with, and again, I do a series. And
I think this will be a good series moving forward, even to pick it back up at different times. And you know, maybe hopefully we can get our other two children in.
You have already spoken, because we're going to try to do that and get multiple in. But you're right. I know our time is pretty much gone. But Minister Clay, instead of ending with a conversation, I want you to reach down, because you're a PK. I want you to reach down, and those that are viewing, and I pray some PKs, or even the mother or father, whatever, if it's a superintendent, a bishop, if it's an elder, whoever, deacon, and their PKs. And I want you to pray this. I want you to pray for the PKs. I want you to, what God has placed in your spirit, and over this series or episode, would you pray for those as we close out, and let the Lord ignite a wave of anointing through your prayer that may heal, bring some closure to some things, or start a conversation of them returning back home that's where I want to really exit this episode,
Yes, sir.
with you praying. Will you do that?
And don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel.
You got it, Mom. Nailed it. Nailed it. Yes. So we will pray. Lord God, we thank you. You're so good to us. You've blessed us in so many ways that we see and ways that we don't see. We just first want to acknowledge you and your wonderful grace and your arms around us. Even in these most difficult times, you are still present. You're still with us. You are sitting with us. You're thinking about us each and every day. You haven't left us alone. You haven't forsaken us. And we are grateful that your hand is still on us. In this moment, we think about all of those Levites, the children of those who serve in ministry. We acknowledge that there are a multitude of individual journeys that have been meddled with and sabotaged because of others and their concerns and their attentiveness and their mischievousness and their sour wishes toward these children who are now adults and have their own children and grandchildren. God, we look back to their wounds and we ask you to heal them.
Yes.
Yes,
That
God.
is the stage in their life.
Yes.
Whether it was wounds when they were not even able to remember and speak and articulate, but they could observe. If it was wounds in times where they were still forming their thoughts and their own opinions of you in their relationship with you, whether they were wounds incurred when they were making the decision whether to walk with you and follow you. Heal those wounds, God.
Heal, God.
We know that some people weren't intentional. We know some were well-meaning, but still were the culprits in causing the wounds. We know others were very intentional and were on assignment, but they don't matter, God. You,
Yes, yes.
you are our Father. You are the kind shepherd who has each of his sheep in mind. You know where we're at all times. You are concerned with our safety. And even now, you're still here protecting, guarding, and willing to make yourself available to bring us back to the fold. I ask right now that you speak to those hearts, that you break up the hardened ground. There are memories that have been suppressed. There are memories that are so painful that we don't even want to revisit them and walk back to them. But God, you can bring us back to those memories. You can give us insight. You can give us release, and you can give us freedom. I pray for liberty. We may not get an apology from everyone for everything that has occurred, but God, I know we don't need an apology. We need your grace. We need your mercy. We need your love. We need to know that whatever has occurred in our past, it wasn't to destroy us, but you as our good Father have been there to lift us up, to help us rebound, to help us learn the lessons, to help us gain the skill, the knowledge, and the experience for the life and the abundant life that you have waiting for us. We shift our focus not on being a preacher's kid, not on situations that we couldn't control, but we shift our focus to you. We shift our focus to this very moment. The past is the past, but God, you have a future for us. You have a calling on our life. You purposed us. You placed us in this tribe of Levi intentionally. It may not be for us to go into ministry, but God, it is for us to serve your people, which is ministry. I ask that you bring us back to covenant relationship with you. Heal us of our pain.
Heal, God. Heal.
Heal us and give us the ability to forgive ourselves. Some of us have held such high standards, God, that the real pain is the letdown within ourselves. Let us forgive ourselves as you've already forgiven us. In the name of Jesus. God, I know you can do it. I know you're speaking even now and that you're going to reach and you're going to bring revelation and clarity. You're going to renew a hunger. You're going to reignite that fire in us, oh God, to be who you've called us to be. And we thank you for it. We thank you for your healing, your strength, and your victory in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Yeah.
Well,
Amen. I'm
praise
sorry, I
the
got
Lord.
lost.
Huh?
I said I got lost. I'm sorry.
Well, praise Jesus.
Yes, Lord. Yeah.
Well, and I believe that they were blessed. And thank you, Minister Clay.
Sir.
Thank you for speaking out your heart. Thank you, First Lady Clay. Thank you so much. And again, what is it? Like
And subscribe.
and
Subscribe.
subscribe. May the Lord bless you into our next episode of Chatting with the Clays. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord smile upon you. Be blessed of God.